Greetings to all. I'm Dr. William Lester, the founder of and the voice behind Blackwater Media. I want to thank you for joining me on this mysterious and bizarre journey into the realm of monsters, phantoms, and all manner of fright, fear, and that which dwells beneath the pale moon. Blackwater Media presents the Shadowland radio show, Anthology 6.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile found...
The Lizard Man of Scapor Swamp is one of the most intriguing and bizarre stories of a cryptid, a creature that is not recognized by science. And it is yet another story that has emerged from the swamps of the American South. The Lizard Man is said to be a humanoid creature with green, scaly skin, red eyes, and three-fingered claws. It stands about 7 feet tall and has a muscular build. It's also very aggressive and has been known to attack cars, leaving behind scratches, dents, and even tooth marks. The first reported encounter with the Lizard Man occurred in 1988 when a 17-year-old boy named Christopher Davis claimed that he was attacked by the creature while changing a flat tire near Scapor Swamp in Lee County, South Carolina. He said that he saw a large figure running towards him from the swamp, and that he managed to get into his car and drive away. But not before the Lizard Man jumped on his roof and clawed at his windshield. He showed the police the damage to his car and described the creature in detail. After Davis's story was publicized, more sightings and incidents followed. Some people claimed to have seen the Lizard Man lurking in the swamp or near their homes. Others reported finding strange footprints or hearing eerie noises at night. One couple even said that they shot at the creature with a gun, but it escaped unharmed. The Lizard Man became a sensation in the media and attracted attention of curious tourists, monster hunters, and cryptozoologists. Some people believe that the Lizard Man was a real animal, perhaps a mutated alligator, or some kind of surviving dinosaur, or other relic from prehistoric times. Others thought it was just a hoax or a legend inspired by local folklore. Still others speculated that it was an alien or a government experiment gone horribly wrong. The Lizard Man has never been captured or proven to exist, but it has left a lasting mark on the culture and history of Bishopville and Lee County. The town has hosted festivals, Comic Cons, and exhibits dedicated to the cryptid. The Lizard Man has also inspired books, documentaries, songs, and artwork by various artists. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, you have to admit that the Lizard Man of Scapor Swamp is a fascinating mystery that deserves further investigation. After all, who knows what secrets lie hidden in the murky waters of the swamp? Africa is a land rich in beauty and history. The continent contains breathtaking landscapes and a wondrous diversity of animal and plant life. And then, of course, there are the vampires. You see, in nearly every country, every culture, and on every point of the map, you will find stories of such creatures. Africa is no different. In fact, it is argued and believed by many that the vampire itself originates in Africa. Let us now take a look at the myriad forms that the vampire takes in that place where man first walked the earth. The Obi-Ifu is a living vampire, either male or female, and was found among the Ashanti people of West Africa. The Obi-Ifu would leave its body at night to cause all kinds of terror. Its food of choice was the blood of children, but when it wasn't eating the young, it was causing slow and painful deaths. It also destroys crops by sucking out the sap and vital juices. The word Obi-Ifu comes from the Ashanti word bayi, which means sorcery. A kind of psychic vampire, the Tikoloshe or Tokoloshe, is a creature of the Xhosa people of Lesotho and the southernmost African plains. Like many supernatural beings in Africa, the Tikoloshe is a mixture of vampire and demon, and has a strong association with witches and sorcerers. In many Xhosa legends, the Tikoloshe is a demon that looks like a baboon and has a connection to water. It's described as short, bulky, and has a high forehead and balding head, and it walks around during night or day swinging its long arms like a monkey. But it has many powers and can shapeshift if it chooses to. It can take human form, which would make it look almost normal or natural, since some of its monkey-like traits would show. It may also take the form of a big black bird-like creature with a skull head, so that it can fly over villages in search of its victims. The Tikoloshe is known for its ravenous sexual appetite, so most of its victims are women. This creature doesn't feed on blood, instead, the energy of a person, leaving them weak and sickly. If the Tikoloshe feeds too often on a single person, it can result in the victim's death. When it's feeding time, the Tikoloshe will approach a village woman at any time of the day in human form. It will greet her in a friendly, albeit sometimes overly friendly manner, maybe offering to help her carry something in return for sexual favors. If she were to say no, the beast would revert to its original horrific form and leap on her before she even had time to react. The Tikoloshe are very fast. Then it would proceed to rape her and feed on her life force. The Adze is a type of vampire creature who turns itself into a firefly or other insect to feed before returning to its human form. They can transform themselves into any number of common insects, which are seemingly harmless and very difficult to capture. The Adze have a taste only for the blood of the innocent. They are hunters of children, and only children, and they especially like to feed on infants. They can also feed on palm oil and coconut water, and will often raid a village's entire supply of these, but they become dangerously weak if they do not feed on the blood of children. An Adze can sustain itself without needing to kill any child. It can take enough blood to survive. However, if the Adze is deterred or thwarted from feeding for a long enough period of time, it will go on a ravenous frenzy for blood. Often, when the vampire reaches this stage of hunger, even the victims who survive become infected with a deadly disease which eventually kills them. The Adze can also have the power to possess a human and become a living vampire. When the Adze is captured, it will revert to its human form. A human sorcerer can also willingly become possessed by an Adze spirit for the abilities and powers they will gain. As an Adze host, they're able to change their form like a shapeshifter from human to something else by magic. When they are captured, however, the magic will be lost and they will revert back to their human form. This is the only way to destroy the Adze, but catching them is the trick. Unfortunately, there is no known way to protect against an Adze. Nothing will keep them out or keep a child safe from its attacks. The only measure that can be taken against them is capturing them and destroying their human form. The safest thing to do is keep your supply of coconut water and palm oil up and set a trap. The Ashanti also have stories of vampire creatures of the forest who are not controlled by any witch, but are monsters in a class of their own. These creatures live in nature, in the wild, and feed on passers-by and hunters. Two such creatures are the Asenbosum and the sasabonsum, very similar in their habitat and feeding practices, though the sasabonsum have wings and are very similar to bats, while the ansambosum are more like humans, save for their hooked legs and iron teeth. The ansambosum live in trees of the forests and feed mainly on those who dare to wander into their domain. They wait silently in their trees to pounce on unsuspecting prey and rip out their throats with their teeth made of iron. This creature is a little unusual looking. Instead of feet, its legs are curved at the end like hooks, which they use to hang from the tree branches while they wait for prey to wander into the forests. The stories of the sasabonsum are well known throughout Ghana and Togo. They also live in trees and will drain the blood of those who wander into their territory. These vampires, while humanoid, look very similar to bats. They are mostly human in appearance, with a human face and somewhat human body, save for their arms, which are short and stubby, and for the wings. Their wings are huge. Some legends claim the sasabonsum to have a wingspan of about 20 feet. The creatures are sometimes described as having emaciated bodies and twisted feet, and sometimes myths tell of these creatures having claws and horns as well, and some myths say that these also have iron teeth. Both of these vampires, though tree dwellers, are deadly and vicious. From the eastern Cape of Africa comes the impundulu, a ravenous blood drinker. The creature is actually a witch's servant, or rather her familiar. It's usually owned by a female witch and is later passed on to the witch's daughter. For this reason, the female children of witches rarely marry. The impundulu is a merciless killer. Entire families and herds of cattle were completely wiped out as the familiar sucked down the blood of each victim. But if the blood loss didn't kill them, it was the wasting disease caused by the impundulu, or sometimes it left you with a horrible cough and the inability to have children, a condition known as ifika. But in rare cases, the victim got a quick death. This was called being slain by the bird of heaven, and it involved a sharp, unbearable pain in the chest or head. And there you have it. These are just a few examples of the vampiric horrors that exist on the continent of Africa. I could go on, I assure you, but the hour's late, and outside I can hear the sound of wind and rain, and perhaps the sound of something else lurking in the darkness. The Wendigo is a ravenous, terrifying creature of Algonquin Native American legends that devours human flesh to survive, though regardless of how much they eat, their hunger remains, which is reflected by their gaunt appearance. They are considered malevolent supernatural creatures of great spiritual power who were strongly associated with the harsh northern winters and starvation. They are believed to roam the forests where the Algonquins once lived, and those that have disappeared over the years are rumored to have been eaten by these creatures. Many Wendigo sightings have been reported over time, not only by Native Americans, but by white settlers as well. The Wendigo is extremely fast and possesses unnatural strength, despite how frail it may appear. The older one becomes, the more powerful it becomes. As its corruption spreads throughout the forest, so does its influence over nature. Some can control woodland creatures, and others are so powerful they are said to be able to control the weather. The Wendigo stands between 10 and 14 feet tall and is gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tautly over its bones. Its complexion is ashen, with eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, resembling a skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it has are tattered and bloody, pulled back over its jagged, misshapen teeth. It is an unclean creature and gives off the odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. The word Wendigo comes from Algonquin, the common translation being the evil spirit that devours mankind. They are also known as spirits of the lonely places. According to the legend, a Wendigo is created when a human must resort to cannibalism in order to survive. In the past, this occurred when indigenous people and settlers became stranded due to the extreme winters of the northern forests of North America. In some instances, the survivors were compelled to cannibalize the dead. Other versions tell of those displaying greed, selfishness, or spiritual imbalance, whom also became a Wendigo. The Wendigo is insidious and predatory. It is extremely hostile towards humans, which it will most definitely kill given the opportunity. The Wendigo is a gluttonous creature with an insatiable appetite which drives it to perpetually kill and eat. The Wendigo will prey on those who are separated from a group or alone. It also has the ability to mimic human voices and will use this skill to lure people away from safety. Once isolated, it will tear them apart with its teeth and claws and devour them. But what of the Wendigo's vulnerabilities? What could one do as a mortal man in the face of such power and evil? The primary weakness of the Wendigo is its frozen heart. Destroying its heart will release, but also kill the human trapped within the beast. This must be done using silver bullets, a pure silver blade, or a silver stake. The shattered heart must be locked within a silver box and buried in a church graveyard or some other hallowed or sanctified ground. The Wendigo's corpse must then be dismembered with a silver blade, salted, and burned to ashes, and afterwards scattered on the wind. Failing this, the beast would rise again and resume its unfathomable acts of terror and evil.
When you say but, you said a lot of things nobody else can say. When you say but, you've gone as far as you can go to get the very best. When you say but, you've said the word that means you like to do it all. When you say but, it means you want the beer that's got a taste, that's number one. When you say but, you tell the world you know what makes it all the way. When you say but, you say you care enough to only want the king of beers. There is no other one, there's only something less, because the king of beers is leading all the rest. When you say Budweiser, you've said it all.
The Kelly Hopkinsville incident took place on August 21st, 1955, at the farmhouse of the Sutton family located between Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky. That night, Elmer Lucky Sutton and John Charlie, J.C. Sutton, were hosting guests along with their wives and children. With a total of 8 adults and 3 children in the house, attention was easily divided between different conversations, paying no attention to family friend Billy Ray Taylor as he left the house to fetch drinking water from the well. Taylor described seeing a stereotypical flying saucer streak across the sky as he retrieved the water from the well before the UFO landed a little over half a mile away from the house. He recounted the story to the rest of the house upon returning, but was met with laughter and ridicule from his friends. The incident was shrugged off as an overreaction by Taylor, and the occupants returned to their game of cards and chatting. A little over an hour later, the Sutton's dog began to bark frantically outside, rousing Lucky and Billy Ray to investigate. Walking outside towards the dog's location, the dog quickly sprinted past them as motion began stirring in the nearby trees surrounding the farmhouse. Unable to identify the emerging figures at first, Lucky and Billy Ray ran back to the house and quickly armed themselves before returning to the scene, prepared to fend off the homestead from thieves or wild animals. Retrieving a pistol and a shotgun, the two men returned outside to confront the figures as the rest of the house watched in disbelief. As the men stepped out onto the porch, they finally saw what had emerged from the forest. Little gray men. No taller than 2 or 3 feet in stature, these humanoid-like figures slinked towards the men, their grossly thin, overly long limbs dragging and swaying as they approached. Their glowing yellow eyes seemed almost glazed over, paying no attention to the men through the vision as their bulbous heads bobbled under their own weight. Taylor also described the figures as having bat-like ears that pointed instantly in the direction of any sound that was being made in its vicinity. Without hesitation, Lucky Sutton shot the humanoid at point-blank range with a shotgun. As the shot collided with the figure, a metallic pink was heard and the figure was knocked down to the ground before abruptly standing right back up and running off with the other figures. A few minutes passed after the men retreated into the house, the occupants obviously shaken. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, these figures would reappear and disappear, peering in through windows and scratching their claws against the panes of glass as if purposely intimidating the lodgers. Firing a reaction shot at one of the appearing figures, Lucky and Taylor once again ran outside to see if they had done any damage to the creature, this time only to be ambushed by one of the creatures standing on the overhang of the roof above the porch. The creature grabbed Billy Ray Taylor by the top of the head before he was pulled back inside by his wife, June. Following this surprise attack, the men spent the next 4 hours fending off 15 of these figures as they stalked on the house, peering into the doorway and windows, looking for an opportunity to get inside. After managing to hold them off with gunfire, the family went to the Hopkinsville police station once day arrived, informing the police of the siege they had just underwent. Known as trustworthy folk, the police had no reason to hold any disbelief toward the Suttons, especially since the adults were sober and the children had recounted the same story. Upon investigation of the Sutton farmhouse, there was little evidence of any creature presence aside from a strange patch of glowing soil, but there was certainly evidence of gunfire as there were holes present in nearby trees, windows, and doors. The encounter of the Kelly Hopkinsville goblins was the start of the, quote, little green men boom in the United States, with the phrase being picked up and used by news outlets and media to describe the encounter and ones that were similar. This, however, is in spite of the fact that the creatures were described as gray-skinned with hues of green rather than being a flat green color. Despite similar encounters being described from that point forward in Hopkinsville and the rest of the United States, there remains a large number of skeptics that all fall back on the same common theory. It was well known at the time that an aggressive family of great horned owls resided in the forest near the Sutton residence, leading many to claim that the family simply mistook the identity of the owls as strange goblin creatures. Skeptic Joe Nickel points toward this fact and states that the residents of the house were more than likely inebriated, regardless of the notion that Lucky's wife, Glennie Langford, was highly religious and didn't allow alcohol inside or near the house, or that the children corroborated the story. That being said, the owl explanation seems dubious. It is highly unlikely that great horned owls would be mistaken for the bizarre goblin-like creatures described. Moreover, no matter how aggressive large owls might be, once the shooting started, they would have almost certainly flown away and not returned. Using large birds as the explanation for encounters with strange creatures has become old hat, and frankly is little more than a dismissive trope. In my estimation, there is no observable evidence of a hoax. Interestingly, there are similar reports in the United States of creatures like the Hopkinsville goblins, though not associated with UFO sightings. Dover, Massachusetts is home to the alleged Dover Demon, a small gray humanoid creature with a large bulbous head and elongated thin limbs that allow it to quickly climb trees. We covered that topic in a previous show. The Chippewa Cree and the Ojibwa indigenous people of Montana share a similar story about a race of small troublemakers known as the Manigishi, or the Mimiguisi. Of course, with such a fascinating story, it's gained a large foothold in popular culture. Geraldine Sutton Stith, Elmer Sutton's daughter, wrote a book describing what her father and family experienced and frequently goes on tour discussing the event with ufologists and fans. Media and games have embraced the story too, with many creatures taking inspiration from the tale, such as the Pokemon Sableye and the diminutive creatures from the film Critters. The Kelly Hopkinsville event may never be fully explained, as most of the family and friends present that night have passed away. Nevertheless, this strange tale of flying saucers and alien interlopers lives on. You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. For centuries, a large winged beast known as the snallygaster is said to have terrified the people of Frederick County, Maryland. The dragon-like beast is described as a half reptile and half bird living deep in the South Mountain caves. The mysterious creature is said to swoop down silently from the sky, stealing farm animals and children from unsuspecting farm folk. And to them, there's no question that this creature is real. The area was settled by German immigrants beginning in the 1730s, who called the creature the Schnellergeist, meaning quick spirit in German. The earliest folklore mixes the half-bird features with the nightmarish features of demons and ghouls. Other descriptions describe the beast as a half-reptile, half-bird, with a metallic-like beak lined with razor-sharp teeth. Sometimes it is described as having octopus-like tentacles. The earliest stories claim that this monster sucked the blood of its victims. The snallygaster has one widely known enemy called the dweyu. The dweyu is reported to be a mammalian biped with features similar to a wolf, but the stance and stature of a human. The dweyu and the snallygaster have reportedly had vicious encounters dating back to the early settlement of the Middletown Valley. For years, the snallygaster lived only on the pages of folklore until 1909, when stories of the beast began to appear in newspapers. Encounters between local residents and the winged creature in February and March 1909 described it as having enormous wings, a long pointed bill, claws like steel hooks, and an eye in the center of its forehead. Further, it was said to make screeches like a locomotive whistle. A February 1909 article claimed that a man had been seized by the winged creature, which proceeded to sink its teeth into his jugular and drain the body of blood before dropping it along a hillside. The story was carried prominently in Middletown, Maryland's Valley Register, and soon spread far and wide, so much so that the Smithsonian Institute offered a reward for the hide. U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt reportedly considered postponing an international trip to hunt the beast personally. What a story that would have been. Strangely, in many of the early articles, the flying beast seemed to be everywhere at once. In New Jersey, it was reported that its footprints were first discovered in the snow. In West Virginia, it was said that the flying beast almost caught a woman near Scrabble and was found roosting in a farmer's barn and laid an egg the size of a barrel near Sharpsburg. A man in Casstown, Ohio wrote a letter to the Valley Register newspaper telling of a strange creature that flew over his area, making terrible screeching noises. He described it as having 2 enormous wings, a large horny head, and a tail 20 feet long. Originally, and as far as can be documented, the creature was first sighted in Maryland by a man who operated a brick-burning kiln near Cumberland. Spied near the kiln sleeping, it emitted a blood-curdling scream when it awoke and angrily flew away. It was also sighted near Hagerstown, south of Middletown at Lover's Leap, and seen flying over the mountains between Gaplin and Burkittsville, where it was reportedly to have laid another very large egg. The last sighting in Frederick County occurred in March 1909, where 3 men fought the creature outside a railroad station for nearly an hour and a half before chasing it into the woods of Carroll County. After that, there were no more sightings of the mysterious creature for the next 23 years, at which time it once again appeared in Frederick County, Maryland. The first report said that the, quote, bird was seen just below South Mountain in Washington County. At the time, it was surmised that as the life expectancy of a snallygaster was estimated at about 20 years, the new sightings were from the offspring of the 1909 creature. The Middletown Valley Register newspaper requested that local residents who saw the creature should provide as accurate and detailed a description as possible for scientific purposes. Soon after, 2 residents reported having seen it just east of Braddock Heights, flying about 25 feet overhead, confirming the descriptions published the previous week. The last known published report of a snallygaster was perhaps the most bizarre. It was reported that the creature had died in Washington County when fumes from a moonshine still overcame it, and it fell from the sky into a 2,500-gallon vat of alcohol. According to the story, revenue agents soon arrived and destroyed both the vat and the carcass. So it seems that we're left once again with another mystery. Another series of sightings and encounters with a strange creature that by all rights should not exist in our world. But if you're like me, you've already made peace with the admittedly unsettling fact that monsters do live among us.
Humanoids from the deep. They're not human, but they hunt human women. Not for killing, for mating. You can scream, you can run, you can hide, but they will find you. Humanoids from the deep, rated R.
The Battle of Los Angeles, as it has come to be called, remains one of the strangest events of World War II, and is still a mystery to this day. The event took place during the nights between February 24th and 25th, 1942. Never fully explained, these events remain shrouded in mystery and the subject of intense speculation. Beginning shortly after 2 a.m. on February 25th and throughout the night, unidentified objects were reported over Los Angeles, and the threat was so unusual that air raid sirens were sounded and a total blackout was ordered. At 3:16 a.m., the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade began firing 12.8-pound anti-aircraft shells at the objects. More than 1,400 shells were fired over the next 58 minutes as the objects moved south from Santa Monica to Long Beach. The obvious thought was that these were Japanese bombers come to attack the United States, says UFO researcher Bill Burns, publisher of UFO magazine. But it wasn't. They were flying too high. And the astounding thing was, not one artillery shell could hit the craft. Out of all the hundreds of shells that were fired, none of them struck home. People outside that night swore that it was neither a plane nor a balloon. It was UFO. It floated, it glided, and to this day, nobody can explain what that craft was, or why our anti-aircraft guns couldn't hit it. It's a mystery that's never been resolved. Descriptions of the UFOs varied widely. General George C. Marshall, in his initial memo to President Roosevelt regarding the event, wrote that the, quote, unidentified airplanes traveled at speeds ranging from very slow to as much as 200 miles per hour, and from elevations of 9,000 to 18,000 feet. At first, officials offered a very vague explanation. According to a Los Angeles Times article dated February 26, 1942, the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, dismissed the event as a, quote, false alarm due to jittery nerves. But when this failed to satisfy the press and the public, the Army responded with a definitive answer that the craft and the battle were real, and the next day, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson confirmed that. Santa Monica's U.S. Representative Leland Ford was quoted in the Times on February 27th, calling for a congressional investigation into the incident, but this went nowhere. In the years since, various explanations have been offered, from Japanese planes to German craft launched from secret bases in Mexico, to unidentified aircraft, to weather balloons, to sky lanterns, and to blimps. However, it is also alleged that General Marshall reported that the Army had recovered an unidentified aircraft off the coast of California that indicated that the mystery airplanes are in fact not earthly, and according to secret intelligence sources, they are in all probability of interplanetary origin. On a cold and damp December night in 1980, two middle-aged women and a young boy were driving along a deserted Texas highway on their way back from a town about 15 miles from Houston. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and her grandson were driving down a rural road in Texas on December 29th of that year when they saw something they could not explain. Betty Cash stopped the car, and the three looked on in dumbfounded amazement. A strange craft hovered about 60 meters away, emitting strange sounds, beeps, whirs, and hums. It was diamond-shaped, with a dull metallic surface and a blue glow around its edges. As curiosity overcame fear, the three got out of the car to get a better look. However, the terrified boy soon convinced his grandmother to return to the vehicle. As they stood there watching the object, intense heat radiated from it, forcing Betty Cash to wrap her hand in her jacket to grab a red-hot door handle. The heat was so fierce that it burned the side of Vicki Landrum's face. After a while, the ship began to rise and move away. As it did so, something even stranger happened. A squadron of helicopters, 20 in total, many of them double-rotor machines like those used for military cargo, appeared, trying, amid the great roar, to surround the craft. When the object moved away at high speed, accompanied by the swarm of helicopters, the two women and the boy tried to follow them with the car. From a different angle, the ghost ship turned into a shiny, oblong, cigar-shaped cylinder. Then it vanished along with the helicopters into the distance. Betty Cash left her passengers at their house and headed to her own. By then, she was feeling sick. In the hours that followed, the three witnesses developed burns and had nausea and diarrhea. Betty Cash's symptoms were the worst, presumably because she was exposed to the object's radiant heat for the longest time. Sick and scared, she sought medical help and was hospitalized for 2 weeks with severe burns. However, several days before, doctors heard about the incident that had preceded the group's injuries. Investigators studied the case for several years without even coming close to identifying the fearsome ship or tracing at least the origin of the more mundane helicopters. Although other witnesses in the area reported that they had seen dazzling lights and twin-rotor helicopters that night, identifying the larger ones from photographs as CH-47 Chinooks, all local military bases denied having such aircraft on the ground. The U.S. government denied ownership of the brilliant apparition. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and her grandson were left only with their lingering injuries and an unfinished story. Betty Cash died at the age of 69 on December 29, 1998, 18 years to the day after her claimed close encounter. Vicki Landrum died at the age of 83 on September 12, 2007. The incident, which has since become known as the Cash-Landrum case, remains one of history's most compelling and mysterious UFO encounters.
Here's to good friends. Tonight is kind of special. The beer we'll pour must say something more somehow. So tonight, let it be low and brown.
Let it be low and brown.
It's been so long. Hey, I'm glad to see you. Raise your glass. Here's to health and happiness. So tonight, let it be all the best.
When you're with good friends having good times, don't just have a beer. Have a low and brown. Because good friends and good times deserve the taste of a great beer. And there's really only one. Low and brown.
Tonight, let it be low and brown.
An incubus is a demon, a malevolent entity in the form of a male, usually an attractive one at that, and is said to seduce women while they sleep. The very word incubus is derived from the Latin words incubo and incubare, meaning to lie upon. Demons of this type have been recorded throughout history, but most especially during the Middle Ages in Europe, though variations do abound the world over. The typical case of an encounter with an incubus involves a woman asleep or in a semi-conscious state where they don't have full command of their faculties. They're usually alone, yet find themselves aware of a very powerful presence. They may not fully understand or perceive what is happening at the time, but the experience invariably is one of overwhelming terror. They are essentially the victims of a supernatural rape. Their very strength and life energy is drained from them. In many cases, the encounter is so surreal that after they wake up, they may well doubt the whole event took place, or pass it off as a dream, even though in some cases their bodies are marked by real physical injuries. Actual reports of incubus attacking women can vary. Indeed, sometimes a woman may be consciously aware of the presence of such an entity while they're alone, or at least alone in terms of other human company. Now, such entities may initially appear as an attractive male with an incredible power of persuasion. Not just through words, though, but by some supernatural power, one that enables them to seduce a woman and have sex with her. Yet, quite disturbingly, either during intercourse or sometime after, the demon reveals its true character, an ugly, malevolent form, causing the victim to feel extreme terror. One way in which a person may be led into an encounter with an incubus is that they move into a location that has suffered a breach between this world and other lower realms of existence. Essentially, a psychic trauma that has generated a weak spot, creating a portal, allowing various entities to pass through into this world. The sight of violent deaths is one example. Such findings come readily from the study of apparitions or ghosts. Encounters with an incubus can also result from individuals dabbling in the occult, most specifically, experimenting with Ouija boards. By doing so, a person can effectively open up a portal solely with their intent to pierce through the veil to other realms of existence, an act which can allow malevolent entities to come into this world and into the presence of those who sought such supernatural contact. And whether the person realizes the dangers or not, they've opened themselves up to an unimaginable evil. In August of 1976, twin brothers Jack and Jim Weiner, along with their friends Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz, became participants in an event involving a UFO sighting, missing time, and medical procedures performed by beings unknown. Not only were the four men fishing buddies, but they were all art students, having met at the Massachusetts College of Art. They set out for what should have been an uneventful, relaxing fishing trip, but it was not to be. After being on the waterway for a time, the four fishermen had canoed to Eagle Lake. They had no luck there and returned to the bank. As they were beginning to get low on provisions, they decided to do a little night fishing. To be on the safe side, they built a roaring fire on the bank to use as a landmark in case they became turned around on the lake. After a short period of time, all four of the men's attention was drawn to a large, bright light in the sky over the lake. It was much more brilliant than a star. Only a couple of 100 yards away, the UFO was hovering over a group of trees. The object began to move and change colors from red to green, then to a whitish yellow. The men were watching the object in awe, wondering what it might be. At this time, they estimated it to be about 80 feet in diameter. Charlie Foltz decided to signal to it with his flashlight. At once, the UFO began to move toward them. They were being watched. The object silently made its way toward the men. They began to dash to the shore, paddling as fast as they could. A light from the object beamed down and engulfed the men and their canoe. The next thing they knew, they were back on the bank. Foltz again signaled the UFO with his flashlight, but this time it rose upward and departed from their view. Then they noticed that the large fire they had started only a short time ago was already burned to ashes, which should have taken several hours. What had happened to them? It was obvious to the men that they were missing several hours of time. Little was said between them. They packed up their belongings and headed back home. As time went by, the events of that terrible night on Allagash would begin to have an effect on their lives. The first man to suffer was Jack Weiner. He began to have awful nightmares of strange beings with long necks and large heads. He could see himself being examined while the other three men sat idly by. The strange humanoid beings in Jack's nightmares were described as having metallic-like glowing eyes with no lids. Their hands were like an insect's with only 4 fingers. The other 3 men were also having dreams of a similar nature. Finally, in 1988, Jack Weiner decided to visit a UFO conference, which was hosted by author Raymond Fowler. When the conference ended, he talked to Fowler and related his remarkable encounter on the Allagash waterway. Fowler was very experienced in dealing with the exact problem that Jim, his brother, and the 2 other fishermen were facing. He suggested to Jim that all 4 of the men undergo regressive hypnosis, a type of hypnosis that recovers lost memories. After the 4 men completed their sessions, it was determined that all of them had been abducted by strange beings from the UFO that engulfed them and their canoe on the Allagash waterway. Part of the abduction involved very sensitive personal issues of the taking of fluid samples and other humiliating medical tests. The men all recall the abduction procedure. Some would recall one part of it and some another part, but when combined, they showed a complete picture of a typical alien abduction. Since the men were all artists, they were able to draw striking depictions of the examination room, the instruments used, and the aliens. This information would be invaluable to those who study the phenomena of alien abduction. The 4 friends would also take lie detector tests, which they all passed, further verifying their bizarre encounter.
After the Lutz family moved into their dream house, they were running for their lives. What happened to them is an experience in terror you will never forget. And you will believe in the Amityville Horror. Rated R.
Now playing at a theater or drive-in near you.
One of the most shocking poltergeist cases of recent times involves a family who was disturbed and terrified by a series of horrific apparitions. The poltergeist activity took place in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and became known as the Barini haunting. What began as a benign but remarkable haunting escalated into terrifying poltergeist activity, making it one of the most remarkable cases in the field of paranormal research. The real name of the family involved has been kept secret to protect their privacy. The Psychical Research Foundation investigators provided them with the pseudonym Barini. The haunting started shortly after Joe Barini moved his wife Rose and 2 of her children from a former marriage into his ancestral New England home in the late 1970s. The first ghost was that of a little girl whose voice was heard one evening in May of 1979. The girl's apparition spoke to his wife Rose, saying, "Mama, Mama, this is Serena." Neither Joe nor Rose knew of any girl in the family's past by the name of Serena at that time. After Serena's first visit, their daughter, Daisy, went to the doctor to have her tonsils taken out. During the operation, there were complications which resulted in her heart stopping, and she nearly died. The timing of Serena's visit and Daisy's near-death experience did not go unnoticed by the Barinis. The ghost girl's visit to the family also coincided with Joe's grandmother having a stroke and eventually passing away. Her connection to the family seems strong as Joe remembers waking up hearing Serena's voice and found his wife choking next to him in her sleep. After shaking her awake, she shared with him that her ex-husband was choking her in her dream. From Christmas 1979 to February 1981, the paranormal activity in the house had decreased. And then in March, Rose was startled by the ghost of a small boy, dressed completely in white, walking along the upstairs landing. It was almost like looking through a milk bottle, Rose later told researchers. It was a very peaceful experience. It stayed for about 2 hours on and off, coming and going. The boy's spirit appeared again a week and a half later, and this time spoke to Rose asking, "Where do all the lonely people go? Where do I belong?" The boy's ghost was witnessed by Joe. He watched the apparition enter each bedroom, then settled on the floor of the hallway in search of something. Curious, Joe later pulled up the floorboards and found a medallion of the Virgin Mary. On one occasion, when Joe saw the boy's apparition, he heard the little boy say to him, "My oldest brother is the only one who can help me." Joe didn't know what that meant, but it turned out to be the beginning of the true terror. It was shortly after this statement that objects started to move in unpredictable ways, with phones flying through the air, doors opening and slamming shut, and objects being yanked from Rose's hands. The Barinis, being understandably upset, sought the advice of a local priest who said that they should ignore the spirit if it should ever appear again. The next time the boy in white appeared to Rose, she did as she was advised and paid it no attention. Immediately, the closet door began to slam, opening and shutting repeatedly. On some occasions, unexplained footsteps were heard in the house, and a box of macaroni was yanked from Rose's hands and thrown to the floor. Joe and Rose returned to the church for help, and 2 of the priests agreed to visit the house. The priests came and they blessed the house and said Mass. Initially, there was a quiet spell after the rituals, but it didn't last long. In June 1981, a new entity descended upon the home, and this one, according to the family, was straight from hell. They described it as a sinister, hunchback male figure, clad in a black cape. Throughout that summer, the spirit, which the Barinis described as having large feet and a gruff voice, appeared regularly in the house. The Barinis tried to question the entity, but the only thing it told them was, "I am a minister of God." Despite this, it brought only fury and intimidation. Rose took the brunt of the figure's attacks, and on one occasion was struck by an opened freezer door. One day when Rose was praying with her rosary, the dark figure tried to distract her with various obscenities. The poltergeist activity increased in frequency and intensity. Joe, Rose, and 15-year-old John reported that they had been struck by thrown objects. The bedroom telephone continued to fly off the table. A bedside lamp fell, striking Rose on the head. Furniture in several rooms was on occasion found overturned or moved. Daisy's bedroom desk was somehow transported down the stairs. The retractable attic stairs were opened and shut repeatedly, and with such violence that it cracked the hall ceiling. Several religious objects were removed from walls or broken. During an evening meal, Rose's arm was twisted behind her back and her head pulled to one side with such force that she began to choke. On more than one occasion, Joe testified that he saw Rose pulled out of bed at night, levitated into the air, and then dropped to the floor. After one of these attacks, bruises were found on her arms and legs, as if from a powerful grip. 2 months after it first appeared, the dark, hunchbacked entity became its most violent. Not long after Joe left the house to work the night shift at his factory job, a loud banging shook the bedroom walls. The bed was rising off the floor, Rose said. I tried to scream and the door slammed so I couldn't get out of the room. The dog was growling and the door opened. Rose struggled to get to the children's bedrooms, but their doors slammed shut, and she was dragged by the unseen force back into her room. Invisible hands began to choke and scratch her. She managed to phone Joe, and he rushed home and ran upstairs to the bedroom where he saw the bed jumping as high as 2 feet into the air and found Rose crouching in a corner, clutching a crucifix. Remarkably, the Barinis still refused to abandon their home. Their minds were changed, however, when one morning they awoke to find a heavy carving knife stabbed into the kitchen table. Fearing that their lives could truly be in danger, the Barinis moved out of the house for a month, putting most of their belongings into storage. Once again, they sought help from a priest who went to the house and performed an exorcism. When the Barinis returned to their home, the evil seemed to have been vanquished. They no longer saw apparitions of any kind or suffered any more poltergeist activity. Ironically, it was only after the haunting activity stopped that Joe Barini invited the investigation by the Psychical Research Foundation based in Durham, North Carolina. The organization is now the American Institute of Parapsychology based in Gainesville, Florida. The investigators were able to corroborate some of the Barini's claims through friends, neighbors, and their priest, all of whom testified that they witnessed poltergeist phenomena in the Barini home. The Ozark Howler is a mysterious creature that is said to live in the remote areas of the Ozarks, a mountainous region that covers parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. The Ozark Howler is a legend that has been passed down for generations by the locals, who have heard its eerie howls and seen its frightening appearance. The origin of the Ozark Howler legend is not clear, but some sources suggest that it may have Native American roots. According to one story, the howler was a spirit animal that protected the land from invaders. Another story claims that the howler was a curse placed on the region by a witch who was burned at the stake by European settlers. Still others believe that the howler is a manifestation of the fears and hardships that the early pioneers faced in the wilderness. The first recorded sightings of the Ozark howler date back to the 1950s, but many families have stories of their ancestors encountering the creature well before that time. The legend gained more popularity in the 1990s when a cryptozoologist named Chad Arment published a book called Cryptozoology, Science and Speculation, which included a chapter on the Ozark howler. Arment claimed that he had collected dozens of eyewitness accounts and physical evidence of the creature's existence. He also speculated that the howler might be a new species of felid or canid, or a hybrid of both. In 2015, the legend received more attention when a local television station in Arkansas reported that they had received photographs of the creature from a viewer. The station contacted the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, who dismissed the photos as a hoax. However, some people still believed that the photos were genuine and that they showed proof of the howler's reality. The Ozark Howler is typically described as being around the size of a bear, with a thick body, stocky legs, black shaggy hair, and prominent horns. Some witnesses also report seeing glowing red eyes, long fangs, and a long tail. The most distinctive feature of the howler is its sound, which is said to be a combination of a wolf's howl and an elk's bugle. Some people also compare it to the screams of a woman or a half-human creature. The howl is said to be very loud and terrifying and can be heard for miles. The Ozark Howler is said to be nocturnal and elusive, preferring to stay in the dense forests and caves of the Ozarks. It is also said to be territorial and aggressive, especially during mating season or when protecting its young. Some stories claim that the howler can kill livestock and even humans with its powerful jaws and claws. Others say that it can cause bad luck or misfortune to those who see it or hear it. There have been many reported sightings of the Ozark Howler over the years, mostly from hunters, hikers, campers, and residents who live near the woods. As one might expect, some of these sightings are simply more credible than others, but they all share some common elements. Here are some examples of notable sightings. In October 2014, a motorist in Benton County, Arkansas, reported that he nearly collided with an unidentified animal on Pump Station Road in Springdale. He described it as a bear-sized, gray, fast-running animal with horns. In December of 2015, a viewer sent photos to 4029 News in Arkansas, claiming that they showed images of the Ozark Howler near Devil's Den State Park. The photos showed a dark animal with horns and red eyes hiding behind some trees. In June 2016, a group of friends camping near Lake Tenkiller in Oklahoma claimed that they heard loud howls and saw glowing eyes in the dark. They also found large paw prints and scratch marks on their car. In August 2017, a couple hiking near Branson in Missouri said that they saw a large black animal with horns crossing a road. They said it looked like a cross between a bear and a goat. In October 2018, a hunter in Texas reported that he shot and killed an animal that he believed was an Ozark Howler near Big Thicket National Preserve. He said that it had black fur, horns, fangs, and red eyes. He took photos of his trophy and sent them to a local newspaper. Of course, there are many theories and opinions about what the Ozark Howler really is, or if it even exists at all. Some people believe that it's a real animal that is yet to be identified by science. Others think that it's a hoax or a misidentification of known animals. Here's some other possible explanations for the Ozark Howler. Perhaps it is a new species or subspecies of felid or canid. Some cryptozoologists suggest that the Ozark Howler might be related to big cats like cougars or lynxes, or to wolves or coyotes. They argue that these animals could have adapted to their environment and developed horns or other features over time. Maybe it's a hybrid animal. Some people propose that the Ozark Howler might be a result of crossbreeding between different animals like bears and goats or dogs and cats. They point out that hybrids can sometimes inherit traits from both parents and exhibit unusual characteristics. Alternatively, it could possibly be a known animal with mutations or deformities. Some skeptics claim that the Ozark Howler might be nothing more than an ordinary animal with genetic defects or injuries that make it look different from normal specimens. They cite examples of animals with horns or antlers growing on their heads or bodies due to tumors or infections. And of course, there are those who chalk all of this up to pranks and hoaxes. Whatever the real answer is, one would have to agree that the Ozark Howler represents a genuine mystery and a perfect subject for cryptozoological inquiry. And if you live in that region, and you should happen to hear a frightening, howling scream ripping through the night air, stay indoors. After all, better safe than sorry.
It took Beethoven 4 years to write that symphony. Some things can't be rushed. Good music and good wine. Paul Masson's Emerald Dry. A delicious white wine. Paul Masson wines taste so good because they're made with such care. What Paul Masson himself said nearly a century ago is still true today. We will sell no wine before it's time.
An extraordinary event in 1967 would practically put the small fishing village of Shag Harbor on the map. Located at the southern tip of Nova Scotia, this rural community would be host to one of the best documented UFO events of the past 60 years. Named after the shag, a bird of the cormorant family, the harbor was literally left off most maps of the time, but that would be changed once and for all. The tiny fishing community had always had its stories. Stories of giant sea serpents, man-eating squid, and ghost ships. The list of local colors would see one more addition to its list. A story of a visit by a mysterious flying craft of unknown origin. This craft would visit the waters of Shag Harbor, permanently stamping the village's name in the public eye. The first indication of this mysterious occurrence would come from local residents who noticed strange orange lights in the sky on the night of October 4th, 1967. Most witnesses agreed that there were 4 orange lights that evening. 5 teenagers watched these lights flash in sequence and then suddenly dive at a 45-degree angle toward the water's surface. The witnesses were surprised that the lights did not dive into the water but seemed to float on the water, approximately 1/2 mile from the shore. Understandably, witnesses at first thought they were watching a tragic airplane crash, and quickly reported as much to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which was located at Barrington Passage. Coincidentally, RCMP Constable Ron Pound had already witnessed the strange lights himself as he drove down Highway 3 en route to Shag Harbor. Pound felt that he was seeing 4 lights, all attached to one flying craft, and he estimated the craft to be about 60 feet long. Constable Pound made his way to the shore to get a closer look at the phenomenal sight. He was accompanied by Police Corporal Victor Werbicki, Constable Ron O'Brien, and other local residents. Pound clearly saw a yellow light slowly moving on the water, leaving a yellowish foam in its wake. All eyes were glued on the light as it slowly either moved too distant to be seen or dipped into the icy waters. Coast Guard Cutter 101 and other local boats rushed to the spot of the sighting, but by the time they arrived, the light itself was gone. However, the crewmen could still see the yellow foam, indicating that something had possibly submerged. Nothing else could be found that night, and the search was called off at 3 a.m. The RCMP ran a traffic check with the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax and NORAD radar in Bacaro, Nova Scotia. And they were told that there were no missing aircraft reported that evening, either civilian or military. The following day, the Rescue Coordination Center filed a report with Canadian Forces headquarters in Ottawa. This report stated that something had hit the water in Shag Harbor, but the object was of unknown origin. The HMCS Granby was ordered to the location, where divers searched the bottom of the ocean for several days, but without positive results. Soon the story of the mysterious crash at Shag Harbor died as quickly as it had begun, that is, until 1993. As the original story faded from papers and newscasts, several theories were put forward. One explanation was that a Russian spacecraft had crashed, which would explain the presence of a Russian submarine in the area. There was also the rumor of American involvement in the follow-up investigation, but there was no official statement from the United States. The Shag Harbor incident would have new life breathed into it by the efforts of investigator Chris Stiles of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. The case intrigued him so much that he decided to search for more details. Stiles found the names of many of the original witnesses through newspaper clippings and was able to interview many of them. Stiles was assisted by MUFON investigator Doug Ledger. These two men would uncover some extremely compelling evidence through their interviews. They discovered that when the divers of the Granby finished their work, the case was not over after all. The divers, along with other witnesses, related these events. The object that dove into the waters of the harbor had soon left the Shag area, traveling underwater for about 25 miles to a place called Government Point, which was near a submarine detection base. The object was spotted on sonar there, and naval vessels were positioned over it. After a couple of days, the military was planning a salvage operation when a second UFO joined the first. The common belief at the time was that the second craft had arrived to render aid to the first. At this time, the Navy decided to wait and watch. After about a week of monitoring the two UFOs, some of the vessels were called to investigate a Russian submarine that had entered Canadian waters. At this point, the two underwater craft made their move. They made their way to the Gulf of Maine and put distance between themselves and the chasing Navy boats. They broke the surface and shot away into the skies. These extraordinary events were corroborated by many witnesses, both civilian and military. Unfortunately, the reports were given, quote, off the record. Ex-military personnel feared the loss of their pensions, and civilian witnesses feared ridicule and their privacy being invaded. The unusual events of Shag Harbor command an important place in the study of UFOs. There is little doubt that on October 4th, 1967, something unknown crashed into the waters of Shag Harbor. For centuries, there have been reports of mysterious creatures inhabiting the depths of lakes across the world. One such creature is said to lurk beneath the waters of Devil's Lake in Oregon. Tales of giant snake-like monsters have circulated for generations, spurring countless expeditions and investigations into its existence. The legend of the Devil's Lake monster dates back hundreds of years to when Native American tribes first inhabited the area. According to their oral tradition, a powerful spirit known as Kuyuwaka lived below the lake's surface and was responsible for ensuring that no one ventured too close to its depths. In more recent times, local residents began reporting sightings of a large snake-like creature in the lake, describing it as being around 50 feet long with smooth black scales. Some believe that this could be an unknown species of large aquatic snake or even a surviving plesiosaur from prehistoric times, though no physical evidence has ever been found to support these claims. Over the years, various attempts have been made to find physical evidence, or at least proof of the monster's existence. In 1965, zoologist Ivan Sanderson organized an expedition to search for traces of Kuyuwaka, but unfortunately came up empty-handed. Similarly, numerous scientific investigations into unexplained phenomena in lakes across North America have yielded no results. In spite of all this, many people still believe that there is something lurking beneath Devil's Lake's murky waters, though opinions vary on what exactly it might be. Some propose that it could be a giant eel or an undiscovered species of giant aquatic snake. Others suggested it could be a surviving plesiosaur from prehistoric times, while still others claim it could be a supernatural entity like Kuyuwaka from Native American folklore. Whatever it may be, one thing is certain. Until tangible evidence is found one way or another, We can only speculate about what lies beneath Devil's Lake's dark waters. For centuries, the Native Americans that lived in and around Devil's Lake, Oregon, told tales of a large creature living beneath the waters of this beautiful yet mysterious lake. To the Chinook, it was known as Sluyuwalamos, water monster. And to this day, visitors to the lake swear they've seen something lurking below its dark waves. So why do they call it Devil's Lake, Oregon? Could it be due to the cryptid said to spend its days in its waters? Or is it thanks to some other dark legend hidden within the story of the lake's past? Either way, it certainly earned its spooky name. The legend of the Devil's Lake, Oregon monster continues to fascinate cryptid enthusiasts around the world today. While there is no hard evidence yet to prove its existence beyond a shadow of a doubt, eyewitness accounts and stories from locals suggest that something strange may indeed inhabit those deep waters, prompting us to ask whether it's really some kind of unknown creature or merely an elaborate myth. Until conclusive evidence is presented either way, we can only continue our investigations into this mysterious lake dweller. In 1987, Minnie and William Winston had been married for 44 years. For the previous 22 years, they'd rented a 6-room red brick home at the corner of Fountain Drive and Morris Street in southwest Atlanta. It was just before midnight on September 8th when Minnie, 77, stepped out of the shower and found the bathroom floor covered with splotches of blood. Mrs. Winston immediately woke her 79-year-old husband, saying, "Come look at all this red stuff coming out of the floor." Spots of blood ranging in size from a dime to a silver dollar were found on the floor and lower walls in the bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, basement, and every hall. The substance was also located under a television and in narrow, nearly inaccessible crawl spaces in the basement. Homicide Detective Steve Cartwright agreed, saying that in his 10 years of service, that he'd never seen anything like this. He called it an extremely strange situation. "I'm guessing it was an animal," stated Homicide Detective Richard Price, "and I hope that's all it was." But it wasn't. You see, the couple had no pets, and there were no rodents in the house. Police were not terribly concerned because William, retired from the National Screen Service Company, was often in bed attached to a dialysis machine, which cleanses the blood of people suffering from kidney failure. However, Mrs. Winston seemed to reject his blood as the solution to the mystery, saying, "I don't know what the stuff is." The bleeding house immediately captured the fancy of Atlanta, drawing crowds from across the metro area. Prying visitors became such a problem that police declared the house a crime scene to prohibit inquiring minds from trespassing. By September 11th, it was known that the blood type in the house was O, and William and Minnie's was A. No match. Atlanta homicide detectives grew frustrated as their work progressed. "We will continue a routine investigation," stated Homicide Commander Lieutenant Horace Walker, "and if we find that no crime was committed, then we're through with it." Detective Price stated, "We're still trying to figure out where the blood came from. We plan to check with the state crime lab today about other possibilities." Police handling of the bloody evidence had come under criticism from the lab. Believing an animal might have deposited the splotches, police had sent fresh samples to Grady Memorial Hospital to determine if it was human or animal blood. Only then, 13 hours after Mrs. Winston called the police, was the state crime lab notified. Crime lab director Larry Howard stated that they could have learned much more, including the gender, ethnicity, traces of drugs or alcohol more easily had the blood been fresh. The only semi-relevant fact discovered by the crime lab was that it looked like the blood was projected out of something or shaken off something. As the police investigation continued, public and media interest intensified. The offices of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, radio, television stations, and the Atlanta Police Department were flooded with inquiries from across the Atlanta area and as far away as California and New York. Are the walls of that house really bleeding? People generally asked. We were swamped with calls, admitted police spokesman Charles Cook. The place was a madhouse. Some people wanted to know if the radio stations were just joking. We're getting lots and lots of calls, an employee of radio station WVEE said. Several were from psychics saying that they could get the blood out of the house. The Winstons found themselves besieged in their home by throngs of curious spectators. The phone rang all night, Mrs. Winston stated on September 10th, and I'm fed up with it. Further, she said, I'm tired of all these people asking me these questions. Mrs. Winston declared that she did not want to have anything to do with the controversy. People are coming out here to see it and troubling us. She was getting very little sleep. The passage of another day left the Winstons even testier than before. From inside the house, Winnie was heard to shout, "What they've said about this is all lies, and just leave us alone." From the bedroom, William yelled, "There's no blood in this house. Now get the hell away from here." One intrepid reporter who gained entrance found spots of blood on the floor and lower walls of the living room, and a quarter-size splotch on the back door. These paranormal mysteries usually just slowly fade away, and such was the case with Atlanta's Bleeding House. The Homicide Bureau and the State Crime Lab never identified the source of the blood, nor did they detect any indication of a hoax or crime. It troubles me that we don't have any answer, Crime Lab Director Howard summed up. Law enforcement personnel were understandably disappointed by their lack of results from the investigation. But the supernatural does not tend to stick around for scientific analysis. With the next bloody slaying in Atlanta, the Bleeding House was forgotten. Thank you for listening to the Shadowland radio show. If you're listening on the Blackwater Media YouTube channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. You can also listen at blackwatermedia.net and the Blackwater Media Facebook page. I'm Dr. William Lester, and I promise to see each and every one of you again on the flip side.